Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we are going to be finishing continuing our study of the Gospel of Matthew by finishing chapter 2. Jesus has been born, and the wise men from the east, the Magi, come to worship him. And one thing that I didn't point out yesterday that I think is important to notice is that when the wise men were in Jerusalem and they said, "Where is the Messiah?" And Herod called the scribes together and the chief priests and said, "Where is the Messiah going to be born?" They knew the answer. They knew the answer immediately. Bethlehem, book, chapter, and verse. Micah chapter 5. It's right there. We know where it is. And we just are introduced immediately to the level of biblical knowledge these people have and the lack of biblical understanding. Because the hubris of a man like Herod to think that if he finds God's Messiah, he can just eliminate him in the crib and there will be no threat to his own power. Let's finish chapter 2, We're going to pick up with verse 13. Now when they, meaning the Magi, had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, again, the third dream now, saying, "Arise and take the child and his mother and flee Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." And he arose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that what was spoken of by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I call my son. Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. That's the second time Hosea has been quoted in Matthew already. And when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its environs, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had ascertained from the Magi. That which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children. This is in Jeremiah 31, by the way. And she refused to be comforted, because they were no more. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Arise and take the child and his mother and go into the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." And he arose and took the child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, that's the fifth, he departed for the regions of Galilee and came and resided in a city called Nazareth, what was spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene. Verse 23. Okay, it's not clear what prophecy is being referred to there in verse 23. A whole lot to talk about. I should have talked about numbers before, it being one of those patterns or multiple patterns that weave themselves through the book. And so we've already seen the number of 7. And I should have mentioned this in the genealogy. We have 6 sevens leading from Abraham to Jesus. 6 sevens, 14 generations between Abraham and David, 14 between David and Zerubbabel, 14 between Zerubbabel and Jesus. The number 12, the number 40, the number 3, patterns throughout. Anyway, when this happens, when they leave, the Magi leave, the angel says to Joseph, immediately go to Egypt. So he goes to Egypt. Why Egypt? Because there's a large community of Jews in Egypt and have been since the Babylonian captivity. Many Jews fled the Babylonians by going to Egypt. They carried Jeremiah off to Egypt, and they lived all up and down the Nile. There's an enormous population of Jews in the city of Alexandria. The city of Alexandria is where the Greek translation of the Old Testament was made, there in the great library of Alexandria. The greatest scholar of ancient Judaism outside the Bible, Philo, is living when Jesus is born in the city of Alexandria. So there are a lot of Jews there, and they live far south down the Nile River. There's a huge cache of letters and documents from Aleppo that was uncovered when they were preparing to build the Aswan Dam. That gives a great insight into the daily life of the Jewish and how large the Jewish community was along the Nile. How are they going to support themselves? Well, God just gave them boxes full of liquid assets, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Did he not? Okay, so once they get there, he'll be able to find employment as he is a builder. And they'll have Jews to live among, and they'll have plenty of funding to get them there and to get them started, because they have this cache of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And this is necessary to fulfill prophecy. Herod is enraged. We already mentioned that Herod's murdered 2 of his own sons. He's not going to stop at murdering all the children in Bethlehem and its environs. And this also is a fulfillment of prophecy. How many children died? Bethlehem is a small village, but it's near Jerusalem. It's only 6 miles from Jerusalem, between 6 and 7 miles. So it could be a lot. I don't know. 2 years. Why 2 years? It says based upon the time that he heard from the Magi. The Magi may have been following this star for 2 years. And maybe Jesus is already a toddler when this happens. The Magi find him in a house, not in the cave. They don't come right after the shepherds leave. Jesus is in a house. And we know that Mary has family there because she visited Elizabeth in this general area. So they might have been staying with family for a while by the time the wise men find him. So they go and they stay in Egypt until after Herod dies. That Herod dies in 4 BC. I mean, these are dates documented. Herod dies in 4 BC. Archelaus takes over Judea from him. None of his children have his entire kingdom. Of course, the Romans control all of it anyway. But the Romans do not give. From time to time, they'll give different ones different areas and replace them. Judea is not controlled by a descendant of Herod. Whenever Jesus is crucified, it's presided over by a Roman procurator, Pontius Pilate. But when Jesus returns with his family to Palestine, Archelaus is there, and so they wisely move, as God told them to, in another dream, to Nazareth. Is this where they're from? Well, they weren't living in Bethlehem. They had to go to Bethlehem for Jesus to be born. But they go to Nazareth, which is a one well town. It only had one well for the whole town. Very tiny little town in Galilee. Galilee has the largest ethnic group there are Jews, but they're not the only large ethnic group there. It's quite an inclusive population of a variety of ethnic groups, and that's where Jesus is going to be raised. Okay, we'll pick up with chapter 3 next time. Thank you for joining me for what is now nearly 9 good minutes with the Word.